Right, this is going to be a fairly personal perspective. I'm going to go through a bit of history, talk a little bit about the TDA's role, then what we've learnt, and where do we go from here. I'm going to starting with history, I'm going to start with the Science Series 3. A number of you will remember that. Believe it or not, it came out 16 years ago now. I bought one of the first ones that were there. I've been waiting for exactly that sort of product. Interesting, £250, 16 years ago, and you got 256K for that device. 2 years later, Series 3A, £400 for a 2 megabytes, so quite a big increase in the availability of memory, but still a lot of money. Then 1994, that was the first Laptops for Teachers scheme. It was run by NCT, funded by the DFES, and we worked together on that. I worked on that project. We had about £5 million in total to spend, and we used 4 suppliers, including Apple. We went for a colour screen. Now that seems fairly evident now, but actually it wasn't then. In 1994 there was quite a debate about whether we should go for a monochrome screen and get probably 2 or 3 times as many laptops, or go for a colour screen. The head of the procurement at NCT at the time, Fred Daly, argued that we should go for a quality of kit for teachers that was the sort of kit that was being used in business at the time. In other words, the sort of thing that, if you like, executives, people in the city were using, we should go for something like that for teachers. And he, as usual, Fred was absolutely right. Interestingly, at the time, Acorn was still very prevalent in schools at that time and was still sort of supported quite significantly by local authorities, but they did not have a colour laptop. And so as a result, they could not be part of this program, and it was quite interesting. I remember at about that time being collared in a NACE conference by about 3 or 4 LEA advisors, saying that in effect we were taking their jobs away from them because we were encouraging schools to move away from Acorn. And my comment at the time was that things had moved on. Acorn certainly had fulfilled a role there in much the same way as BBCB had, but times had moved on. We used 2 teachers per school because of the principle of buddies. It was a good principle then, and it has been ever since, I would argue. The key thing then was the evaluation. It was carried out by the University of Nottingham. It was published in 1996, and I'm not sure whether it's going to work. This is so let's give it a go. It might do. There was an evaluation. It was Roger Frost talked about it in the TES and mentioned it. And the key thing about that is that all the indices about use were over 80%. There was no doubt, we knew in 1996 the best way of updating teachers' ICT skills was to give them a laptop, give them support, but that was the best way of doing it. This isn't going to go, so I'll forget about that. It was just really a little summary of that. There was a leaflet that was published at the time by NCT and was made available at the BET exhibition the following year in January 1997, and that was quite a significant thing because it talked about how effective that program had been. Also in 1996, Stevenson Commission report was published, and that report, and Stephen Heppel was a key member of that commission, that report made the case for investing funds into training our existing teacher force in the use of ICT. That was a clear recommendation from that report. And as a result, that ended up in the Labour election manifesto the following year, just before the election. The teacher training for ICT was highlighted there, but it also, for the first time, mentioned that lottery funding was going to be used for that. I won't labour that point because this is about handhelds, but we could have an interesting debate. Same year, the Science Series 5 was released. A brilliant piece of kit, had that way of folding, which has been used by other products since. All of the Science Series was designed and made in the UK, which is probably one of the reasons, not so much why they went out of business, but really more that they never moved into the cheaper way of manufacture that some other companies did offshore. 1998, the start of the investment in schools. Government was elected in 1997. Labour government elected, made a clear role, as you know, education, education, education. And in effect, money was put exactly where that was said. Investment in ICT in schools has started, well in excess of 2 billion now, and we learnt, because there was a growing knowledge about the use of laptops and how effective they were, there was quite a significant investment in laptops as well. Last real product from Scion, as far as handhelds were concerned, apart from specialist ones, Scion Series 7. That was released, and as it says there, this was reviewed in the States by Geek.com. Scion Series 7 not only received the full 5 out of 5 Geek heads for geekness and quality, but also forced me to purchase one for myself. Superb piece of kit. The laptops for teachers' evaluation. One of the key reasons for teacher success was that they had ownership and exclusive use of the machine over a long period. Interviews suggested this encouraged them to invest time in learning the systems. Another key reason was the portability of the machines, of the machines. Not only did this lead to many extra hours of use at home, but also when teachers needed support, they could take the machine to a colleague. Clear read across to handhelds. Interesting, the development of laptops and the development of handheld computers have been virtually entirely separate. One has come from the PC background, the other one has come from an entirely different background, but actually the advantages at that time of both, there were similar ones. TDA Policy. We really started this approach in about 2002, and it was quite clear by then that we were getting behind with regards to the training of teachers. Huge investments in ICT in schools, including in laptops. Not only was the government's direct investment taking place, but there was also local authorities such as East Sussex County Council who had a policy of giving every teacher a laptop. So huge investment there. And we'd set about trying to catch up. So initially we put £5 million into teacher training. We have at any one time about 35,000 people training as teachers. And we started the process of getting laptops into their hands, and we made that our target. Interesting point. I can't remember exactly this was. It may have been 2003, maybe 2004. I've got a feeling it was 2004, but I would have said things have moved on there. Jonathan Ive was doing a video conference from his office in California, and he was video conferencing to the Apple shop. One summer evening, I went along to that. Stephen Heppel was doing the facilitating of that, and he was asked a number of questions, and one of them prompted this response. And I thought that was quite interesting, because it wasn't very long after he said that things were changing. Because as we know now, we do not rely on the PC or the laptop for the real use of a PDA or a handheld computer. They have got sufficient activity, there's sufficient within them as far as the range of things you can do, that you're not as dependent now as you were on the laptop or PC. And that change, I mean, Jonathan Ive knew what he's talking about then, he knows what he's talking about there now. One of the chief designers in the world, let alone in the States, UK trained and educated. TDA policy from 2004, we shifted to some extent. It was quite obvious that we were really making some real significant improvement in laptops, but we wanted to move further afield. As a result, we funded our teacher training providers, of which we have 240, to provide things like video capture and analysis for teacher training. Very interesting aspect. You may think at first hand that's possibly threatening, but if it's done within a way which is sympathetic to the actual teacher who's being trained, it's a very powerful medium. We also invested in interactive whiteboards to match the investment government was making. We invested in video conferencing, which is still an issue for us. I think of all the issues we found most difficult as far as the technical aspects are concerned, video conferencing has been the one. And we started the major investment in PDAs. Current position now. Personal access to laptops improved from 20% to over 60% in less than 3 years. ICT skills of trainees has shown a significant increase in just those 3 years. It could be, and it has got something to do with the kit that we've given them, but the fact is that the actual ICT skills of people entering teacher training now has never been higher. It's the actual entry level where we've seen the most dramatic effect. And what we're finding, because of that, our teacher trainers are more able to spend their time on dealing with the pedagogy of ICT without having to spend so much time on actually catching up with their ICT skills. There are some exceptions. We do find that there's about a 20% confidence level difference between our trainees who are under 25 and our trainees who are over 45. And that's not insignificant. The average age of our trainees is 28. We get a lot of people entering teacher training, as you probably know, who are actually gone to their second or third career. Let me move on. So what have we learned? From the PDAs we've made available, handheld computers we've made available for teacher training, over 1,000 of our trainees are currently using them. They're using them through the teacher training providers, and they're using them as projects. So we get feedback from every project. That feedback is on our teacher training resource bank. What we're finding, the key things about them, the thing that makes a PDA so useful, or one of the key things, is the multifunctionality of it. That's been a critical factor with the use by our trainees. I should add, I've left some of the things out because you would have heard them before in other presentations. So I'm concentrating on the aspects that we have found with trainee teachers. Most of the other things that you've come across also apply as well, but these are the things that we found peculiar to them. A camera is often the most useful part of a PDA. Now that came across pretty darn well with the very interesting presentation from colleagues from Durham. It's equally true of trainee teachers, and what was most interesting is that quite often the project thought they were going to use PDAs to transfer information for the calendar, and using particularly the connectivity part of the PDA. In fact, they often found it's the camera which is the thing that really gets people switched on, be they a pupil or a trainee teacher. Internet access costs are still an issue in school or university. We haven't got away from that entirely. I've thrown one in there about tablet PCs, and I think it's relevant because the difference between a PDA and an ultra-mobile PC, for example, is not necessarily the size of it. The thing that makes the difference on an ultra-mobile PC, you can run a full, all of the full aspect of Windows. You've got the full aspect of Windows there. You haven't necessarily got that with a PDA. And we found you've now got ultra-mobile PCs and smaller PCs, which are close to tablet PCs. Our experiences from the projects that we have funded and we've been looking at is that a tablet PC is of questionable value, particularly if you buy the one where you can flip the screen over and you've got the keyboard as well. You have to ask yourself, it's about 50% more expensive. You have to ask yourself, is it worth that 50%? A few people have found it is. On the whole, most people have found it isn't. The other thing is outcomes are often different to expectations, and I want to show a video clip here. Now this is a video clip, it's from Teachers TV, but it's about a project that I've been seeing, and I'm also on a project board for it. It started out in Goldsmiths College as purely a PDA project with Richard Kimball, who is very active in this area, and also his principal focus is design and technology, which is also an area that I cover at the Training and Development Agency for Schools.
The Essential Education projector range from Hitachi sponsors ICT programs.
Forgive the advert.
Overlooking the Tamar estuary is Saltash School in Cornwall. The D&T department has been hosting eScape, a trial of handheld digital devices called PDAs, led by Richard Kimball and Tony Wheeler of Goldsmiths College.
Tick boxes and then press OK.
The devices contain customised software that pupils can use to develop and record their ideas, which are then beamed up to a web space on the teacher's computer. The two-day trial tested the effectiveness of the PDA as a tool to enhance pupil learning and for assessment. But before letting the pupils go, they're asked for their reactions.
Tell me what you think about, in general terms, about the PDA.
I think it's good the way that all the work that you've done is together all in sort of one portfolio, because I usually have a problem with keeping things together. I lose things quite often, and I think it's good, yeah, the way that things are kept together.
I find it also a lot quicker, because it's taken us 2 days and we've come up with like some really good ideas and we've got like loads of information down.
It's just really good because you've got everything in one and you don't have to, you've got one each, so you don't have to share.
Okay.
Now I'm going to come out of this because
if you think there are things that we might change, either about the activity or about using the technology, or was it all just perfect?
It was all right, but
I've come out of that. You can see it on Teachers TV. If you do a search under Goldsmiths or under PDAs, you'll find it there. The reason why I wanted to show you that is because it's what's really happened since. That started as a fairly simple project that Richard was running using PDAs, and also, as you can see, the children were recording what they were doing as they were doing it. They were photographing it, they were recording, making notes about the progress of the work, and particularly valuable for design and technology because, as you will know, it's not just about the finished product, it's about how you get there. What then Richard found from that is that actually this is, he's got an interesting way of assessing that work because all the assessment process was there. And he developed that further, and as a result, a number of the examining boards are now interested in how he's developed that, and he's now been commissioned by several of them to look at that work in other subject areas. So from what is a reasonably simple, in some respects, PDA project, a whole new way of looking at certain things, using perhaps the principle of wisdom of crowds, which some of you may have come across, a whole new way of looking at the issues around assessment, or if you like, using technology to look an old way, because in fact the principle was there before the war, but using technology to look at a way of assessment has been developed from this PDA project. And he's currently running with that at the moment. And it's really just to say, it's just to reinforce the point, you don't always get what you expect, and you quite often get a lot more than you expect. Just a couple of things about what others have learnt. Teachers like laptops for their personal admin. Students prefer handhelds. Fairly glib, but actually there's a fair amount of evidence around about that. What we found quite often when we talk to teachers about the trainees who've gone into schools with laptops, they don't always take them with them. And if there is one good thing about a handheld, the likelihood is, and I think that came across in earlier presentations, there's much more likelihood that a child or a student will have their handheld computer with them than they will have their laptop. They're more likely to leave the laptop at home for a whole range of reasons, not just the weight, but issues around safety and security as well. Handhelds linking home to school, most success, the evidence suggests, where access is low, and the final point about laptops more likely to be left at home. Where do we go from here? We know it's not just about the technology, although actually when the Science Series 3 came out, to me it was all about the technology, and I have to say, to a large extent, it's been about that ever since. Technology often solves the problems. The picture there is a piece of kit that's just been released in the last fortnight, and what we've got there is a kit dedicated purely to going on the web, no audio, no video, but you get about an hour a day's access to the web for a flat rate for the piece of kit, which is under £200, and another £40 a year, and you get a day's use an hour's use every day. No worries about going over the top and having to spend loads of money. And what's happened there is that the web pages are made incredibly, the technology makes the web pages such that the actual amount of broadband use is much reduced. So quite often the technology solves the problems. We have to recognise the limitations of laptops. We've moved on since then. Every teacher now who needs a laptop in a school generally has access to one. As I say, the access from our trainee teachers is now nearer 70%. We've moved on from laptops. The last point really is the need to act on the outcomes. And I want to illustrate this by, this was a research done by FutureLab, one of their publications. I'm a great fan of FutureLab and the work that they do, and also the publications that they made. I won't bother to read it, but what it's saying here is that handheld computers had a really profound impact in a particular way and with a particular group of children. And I think one of the challenges for us is to see where that impact is, to see where it can happen, and actually act on it. And that, I think, is a key thing. And we've seen examples of that this morning with other presentations, particularly from our colleagues from Durham, but also from the others as well. And I think the challenge for those of us who are working in government or working in civil service and in related areas is to make sure if we do get those profound impact, that we actually act on it and make it work. Thank you.